Okay, so good evening and welcome everyone to we're in June, the June edition of Jozi and Cape Town Pug. So thanks everyone for being here tonight. Hope you're all trying to keep warm. Just some logistics as usual. Just make sure you are keeping yourself on mute, as background noise can cause interruptions to others. That being said, I don't think any of us mind being interrupted, so if you have a question, feel free to come off mute and ask. We are keeping an eye on the meeting chat and the raise hands feature, so you can use both of those as well. Just to note, the session is being recorded, so if you don't want to be recorded, please then just drop off. We do publish all the recordings onto our YouTube channel. I will share a link again in the chat window once I'm done with all the content. Now, just the agenda for tonight's just going to go through the news as usual, all the new announcements that are coming through. And then Michael's going to take us through Power Virtual Agents and Azure bots. So we're going to see some cool things there, help demystify some of the things and show us, because I understand you came across a couple of challenges where the naming standards are different between the two. So hopefully he's got some good tricks in that for us. Monet's then going to take us through a tech tip through SVG images and that's using those in our apps, and then we're just going to open up the floor to general discussions. Okay. Any questions or comments before we get going? Okay, perfect. So some new announcements. Build was great. For those of you who got to attend it, there were some awesome announcements coming out over there. So a lot of the content I'm going to be sharing is from there directly. One thing that's also great is the Process Advisor for Power Automate is now generally available. So this helps it make it easier for organizations to understand where there may be bottlenecks inside their organization and help them to automate some of those processes. I've just got a very short video that I just want to play that just explains it in more detail for those who haven't seen it before. Video.
Picture this. If your business could get back all the time it takes for those repetitive activities people do every day, your teams could focus on what's most important and just let automation do the rest. Yet how do you know what to automate or where to start? Remove the guesswork with Process Advisor and Power Automate, and identify opportunities for automation, even for workflows that are complex or always changing. Process Advisor helps you to better understand places to streamline workflows by identifying which activities take the most time, providing insights about which parts of your processes would be best to automate, and revealing ways to improve efficiencies. Quickly capture the detailed steps for each process in your organization, working on your own, or inviting colleagues to contribute and collaborate. Understand where the bottlenecks are, discover which steps are repeated the most, and find opportunities to automate with end-to-end visualizations of each process. Application analytics show you which applications teams spend more time in, while the analytics dashboard highlights the best activities to optimize. You're then guided to create cloud flows with automation recommendations that reveal which connectors to use based on your workflows. With Process Advisor's insights and guided recommendations, you're ready to begin automating and reclaim the time you need for what matters most.
Then we just had a brief overview of Process Automate and how to bring that in. Might be a good topic for a future session just to dive a bit more into that solution and see the value that it can add. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Other announcements, we've announced a new Power Apps developer plan, which is completely free and gives developers the ability to create environments, test apps, and it has full support for all the premium connectors, Dataverse, and additional other environments. So it's very easy for you to start playing around, testing it out without you having to incur any costs. For those who have got a developer plan with Visual Studio, it is included directly there as well. Okay, so you can start playing around and testing it out Completely free, but it's designed to test and develop apps before pushing them to production. So it's a good place if you want to test out new connectors, custom connectors, and get your solutions built out without worrying about any costs incurred. Great way to help people move a bit forward. And that's a big theme that we saw coming out of Bold, is we tightly integrating with the development space a lot more, and we're pushing developers to utilize the platform a lot more. And you'll see some of the announcements coming through are speaking directly to that. There is also a new learning path available for developers to help them understand low code and help them get developing. So check it out on Microsoft Learn. It's transform your business applications with Fusion development. This is just to help get developers understanding the platform, understand how they should be looking at it from a traditional development approach, and also to start building out various components in the platform. So check out the learning path. It is new. It has been added. There's also PowerFX now gives you the ability to use natural language when setting up your items. So this is using GPT-3, and using that natural language engine, you can go and ask certain questions, and it is going to build out your formulas for you, making it very quick and easy for you to get going. So if you need to put a specific filter in or some other thing, you can use natural language, and it is then going to give you that expression automatically that you can then just put in. Other one, we've finally got the Visual Studio extension available for VS Code as well as Visual Studio itself. And this is great because now you can open up solutions directly from Power Apps. You can go and download a Power App and then open that directly in Visual Studio, and then go and start adding your various components and additional items that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in the low-code environment. This is available from, I think it was last week already, but you should be able to go in and add the extension already, test it out, start playing around with it. There's a lot more functionality available that we're going to be bringing into the platform as well. Next one is around extending your bot capabilities with the bot framework composer. So giving a bit more functionality to Power Virtual Agents using the bot framework. This is what Michael is going to be covering a bit later. And he's going to demystify some of these things, when to use it, some tips and tricks and things to look out for. So portals are also included in the VS extension. Okay, great. Thanks, Mono. Good to know. There's also been 3 new Power App solutions for Dataverse for Teams to help create more inclusivity around the organization. These build on the employee ideas and the expansion apps that we had originally in Teams. So you've got the Profile Plus app, the Boards app, as well as the Perspective app that you can download. These templates are available for you to start utilizing in your environment. Now, the one thing to remember, you can still access these applications in that outside of Teams. Just one thing to note, it is going to then incur an additional license. You're going to require additional licenses for those because it's got that Dataverse connection. So it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. And then lastly, we are bringing in a new feature when you're busy packaging your solutions and putting them together. In the past, it didn't really care if you had all your relationship lookups mapped out and everything was sorted out before you built the solution, before you exported it. Now, from October, we are going to be doing checks on the solutions automatically as part of the process. So today, you don't go through those checks. It doesn't check anything else. And when you then imported that solution in, you're going to sit with problems and you're going to struggle to get things set up. Now we're going to be able to do all the tests while you are busy building it and make sure that everything is in place to help speed things up and just make things a little bit easier moving forward. Okay. I think that's it on the news for now. Is there any other news announcements that anyone else heard or that they've come across over the last month that they feel that might be important to raise? Thanks for sharing the learning path, David. Okay, perfect. So that looks good. So with that, thanks everyone. Michael, I'm going to hand over to you.
Oh, you are you?
I am.
Okay, let's try this. There we go. And let's just move my Teams instance down here. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can see the presentation. Yeah, the slide, yes.
Okay, good. So I think firstly, if I start breaking up, because in the beginning, Jonathan, I didn't hear you so well. I don't know if it's my network, but if it is, someone let me know, and then I can try and change network. But yeah, I've got a few slides, but mostly I'm just going to try and demo my learning. And being the idiot that I am, I offered to present on a topic I didn't really know that well. So most of my learning is going to be based on like how to get started and get going. And hopefully out of this, you'll have a good understanding of kind of like how these worlds collide in a good way. And kind of positioning them and when to use what and kind of where to go to get going. So that's the idea. You're welcome to pause me and stop me at any point and ask a question. I definitely don't think I know everything, that's for sure, but I'll try and help where I can. And I'm actually going to turn off, actually I'll leave my video on until someone complains that the bandwidth's not working. Okay, so the intention is I want to focus more on the right-hand part of the slide in the session. So the idea is today, if you wanted to build a bot, you've got quite a few choices in terms of how you go about creating one. And one that I'm assuming that many of you are familiar with is the Power Virtual Agent. So this is part of the Power Platform. This is the low-code, no-code, really, drag and drop experience to assemble a bot and to create a conversation. And then you can publish that bot to many channels, whether it's Teams, Skype, web chat, a third party like Twilio, like WhatsApp, or whatever it might be. And, you know, essentially no coding skills required. It's got quite a cool designer. You can debug it and see where you are in the process when you're testing it out. And that's all well and good. So that's one way. Another mechanism that you can use to build a bot is to dive into Azure and create a bot using the Azure bot service. And this is more designed for developers. So if you're more of a coder, you know, today when you built a bot, you could say, no, I'm not doing it in Power Virtual Agents. I'm going to jump across into Azure. I'm going to build it there in code. And obviously that is a lot tougher because you need to code it. But also with code, you get the ultimate flexibility, right? There is no barrier because, you know, technically speaking, in code, you can kind of do anything you want. And so there's more you could do in the Azure bot service than if you used a Power Virtual Agent. I hope that kind of makes sense. And so, you know, when you start off, you've kind of got this choice. And so actually what I want to talk about today is not actually the choice, but what happens if you use them together. In other words, I like what I get with Power Virtual Agents, but I also like the power of the bot service. And so I want to use them together and kind of like, what would those scenarios look like? So that's essentially what we're going to go through. So if I look at the Azure bot service, so forget about virtual agents for a moment. So that first slide on the right-hand side, I want to build one in Azure. You basically have two choices. You can either use something called the bot framework composer, which is what you see on the left-hand side. And this is a graphical designer. Kind of in a way, it looks a little bit like Power Virtual Agent. And in here, you can drag and drop components and build your bot through the composer. Now, what it's actually doing under the hood is it's actually creating code for you. It's actually creating Visual Studio project that you could actually go and open up in Visual Studio if you wanted to, and then code it as well. So it's actually kind of like a front end that's doing the work behind you to create what you could do on the right-hand side, which is open up Visual Studio Code, or whatever it might be, and like code it from scratch in C# or JavaScript, as it were, and use the SDK directly. So those are kind of like your two options, albeit the one on the left actually is doing what's on the right at an abstraction level for you anyway. And obviously when you build this thing, it builds code, and then you have to host it somewhere. So essentially you're going to go and host it in a web app, essentially in Azure, and that's where the service runs. And then you're going to connect like your channel to that. You know, your chat widget's going to connect to that and then consume that service. So I hope that kind of makes sense so far. And just to give you a sense of what I'm speaking about, if I just jump here into Azure, what I've previously done is I went and said, hey, I'm going to create a bot in Azure. So you go and you say, I want to create a resource, and then it creates a bot, but actually doesn't do much. And then the landing page on that, you'll see here, it's giving me, okay, well, how do I want to get started? Do I want to open the bot in the framework composer and then start designing the bot there? Or do I want to actually write code with the SDK? And then what it does is it gives you a link to GitHub to a whole bunch of sample projects. And you open up those sample projects, either C# or JavaScript, in Visual Studio Code, and you literally start coding away from a sample. And then with either of those models, essentially you publish, and essentially that uploads what you've created locally on your PC into the web app, and then you've got your bot. And you'll see, for example, from the left-hand side here, you've got channels, and then you can go and publish your bot to a specific channel. And one of the new ones, which is pretty interesting, is telephony, which hopefully I'll speak a little bit more about later. But don't just remind me there. Yeah, so that's kind of like the high-level concept. Any questions so far? Nope. I hope I'm
good. Michael, it's Yaku.
Right, there
yes.
Just a question on the choice between JavaScript and C#. Is there different functionality in choosing those two languages, or is it essentially the same, just a different language? I don't know if that question makes sense.
Yeah, look, I'm not the absolute guru, but from what I can see, they're the same. It's just a choice.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So it's not like a front end versus a back end. You know,
no,
you can do certain stuff. All right, cool.
No. You can. As far as I see, it's pretty much the same. And when you go to the GitHub examples, you'll see for every single sample project that they've got, there's a C# version and a JavaScript version.
All right, cool. Thanks.
So yeah. So it's just a choice of language. Yeah, and obviously then it's different also in terms of how you run it on your local machine when you're testing it out. So like you would have a Node web server environment for JavaScript generally, and then if it's C#, you might use Visual Studio and just hit play, and it starts IIS Express as the web server on the local machine to host the bot.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's kind of just jump into this a bit. Do this. So we'll spend a bit of time now in Composer, just kind of show you how it works. So this is the bot framework Composer. It's a free tool. You download it. If I go to the home, you'll see when I get into this thing, I can create a brand new project. And when you create a project, it's got some examples, C#, JavaScript, and then I can go and, for example, create an empty bot. And I actually did that previously. And let's just show you. So this is actually the solution it created. So you'll see this is a Visual Studio solution, and it's gone and created the code for me. So that's actually what this thing is doing. But then I just get this cool design there instead of actually having to write code. But I could always open up in Visual Studio and modify it there if I wanted to. And also when I create it here, I get a little test tool in here as well to have chat conversations. And so essentially I can go into here and build my entire bot just in this environment, which I'm not actually going to do. So let's just jump to Power Virtual Agent, and we'll do it from here. So in Power Virtual Agent, you've got the concept of a topic. And a topic is, something that the bot understands, a topic that it understands, like the weather or cases and tickets or municipal services. It's a topic that it knows how to deal with. And typically you would have seen in the past, you come in here and you create a new topic, and then you get the designer in here and you go and kind of design it out. But what you can do now is you can drop this down and you can say open in Bot Framework Composer. And what this essentially allows you to do is to build a topic, but not in the designer in PVA, but in Composer. Okay. And so when you open in Bot Framework Composer, it opens this tool here, and it essentially downloads your PVA project, in quotes, onto your local machine. And so my bot is actually called Chuck in PVA. So there it is, it's Chuck. And it even gives me my topics that I saw in Power Virtual Agent. Now, if you click on any of these, it's actually just going to open the browser to those topics, which is not, so I'm not going to actually edit it here. But what I can do from here is within my, I'll call it my bot, I can go and add a new trigger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build out a weather bot. Just so like I can say, what's the weather like? And then it's going to go and get the weather for me and present it back. So that's essentially what I'm going to build. David did this before in PVA, but I'm going to do this here instead. And now what you'll see is it's going to say, well, what's going to trigger this? What are my trigger phrases? And you'll actually see down here, you go and define what your trigger phrases are. This syntax here is something called LG, which has got nothing to do with appliances. It stands for language generation, and it's actually super, super powerful. I'll get into more details a little bit later, but this is essentially a comment. So I can take these comments out, and now I can go and say, please tell me the weather. What's the weather like? Let's just take that out, and I could put in another one, which is just weather. So any of these phrases or something like that's going to trigger off this. I need to give this a name as well. So let's call this Meetup weather and submit it. So now I've got my designer. So this is going to trigger off when it detects these types of phrases over here. And the first thing I'm going to do is send a response. Now, once again, looks similar to PVA, but what you'll notice is the options that I get here are, there's a fair few more than you get with PVA. So the options for looping, managing properties, and a whole bunch of other things. And I'll give you an example of some of those. So anyway, so let's send a response. And the first thing we're going to do is just say welcome, welcome to the weather topic. And on the right-hand side here, this is where essentially you go and kind of put your config in. And you've got two designers. You've got one here, which there's a visual designer where you can go and put in your responses, or there's this show code option, which you kind of get into the source. And this is this language generation. And what's cool about language generation is it also supports expressions and functions and if-else statements. So for example, you might want to send a response that says, good afternoon when it's the afternoon, but good morning when it's the morning. And so you can say, if the time of day is afternoon, then send this response, otherwise send this response. So you can do quite a lot of logic and have functions like dates and times and trims and lefts and uppers and all these types of things to kind of program your responses back differently. So for example, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say, welcome to weather service. So that's what's the response it's going to send back to the person who's using the bot. Now, what's pretty cool is you can actually do multiple lines. So you can say, welcome to my weather bot, or just howdy. And now what's going to happen now is it's going to kind of like randomly choose one of those rows to send a response back. And then what this means is like you're giving the bot, in quotes, a bit of a personality. It's not always going to respond with the exact same thing. Sometimes it might say how's it, and sometimes it might say howdy, and you kind of get the idea. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So anyway, so it's saying howdy. And I didn't show you these expressions up here, but from here I can go and put in functions, regular expressions, convert stuff. So that's what this is for here. I'll do a bit more of it in a minute. Anyway, so now I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to say, like, what region are you in, or where do you want weather for? What city? And so once again in here, you've seen this. I can go and type it in. Just while I'm here, a few other interesting things. You get different types of content you can send to the user. So I can do a text, like send them text, which is what I did earlier on. But you'll see these other types. Now, this is interesting, speech. So speech basically says, I'm just going to say, city mate. What this is really cool. You can take a bot. Now, this is not in PVA yet. Okay, it's not in PVA yet. My understanding it's coming. Earlier on, I showed you there's a channel that I can publish my bot to. You saw Teams and Skype and web chat and all these things, but there's a channel called telephony. And so essentially you get a telephone number. And so when someone phones the number, this bot gets executed. Not executed, I mean run. And if it's coming through the telephony channel, this is what it's actually going to say to the person. So literally your bot is going to say out loud, city mate. But if they're coming through a text-based channel, it's going to say, please type in city. Make sense? So it's kind of like I'm building the bot once, but just giving it like variations depending on what channel it is. I can also do what's called an attachment. I can send an attachment instead of raw text. An attachment is generally going to be like an adaptive card or like a rich experience. So you want to send like not just text, but a card that looks very cool, that's got video in it or audio or images. And so I can go and use one of those cards here. And then there's also actions as well. So kind of like custom actions that you can go and submit, which I'll show you a little bit later on. Anyway, so let's just go back here. So it's going to say, please type in the city. And now this gets really cool. So when the person types in, what city that they want for the weather, we're going to actually go and save this into a variable, right? So I'm going to put it into a variable. Now, you get a few kind of like contextual objects that you can save variables into. So for example, one of the objects I can go and save this into is actually the user object. So there's something called user, and I'm going to put this into the location property of the user. I just made that up. But also maybe you want to do something before it kind of gets saved in there. So what I'm going to do, and this is where you can start using functions, is you might want to trim off the white space off what the person types in, and what they type in is going to be in this temporary variable, this.value. It's going to trim it, and then it's going to go into user location, which is pretty cool. The other thing I want to do is I want to do some type of validation. In other words, maybe you're asking for an ID number, and you want to validate that it actually looks like an ID number. So you want to do a regular expression validation against that input. You could do that. Or validate it against a specific length. It must only be a number, whatever it might be. Maybe you've got a format for case numbers, and you just want to validate that. So this is where you can go and add in validation rules. So I'm going to just do a very basic one. I'm going to say the length of what they put in must be greater than 2 characters. So they can't put anything that's less than 2 characters. And if it's not greater than 2 characters, then I want to send back some responses. So I want to say your city must have more than 2 characters. And then I can get even more fancy. I can go and say, well, actually, we'll only allow this to happen 3 times. And then after the 3rd time, we're not going to ask again. We're just going to default to to Johannesburg. Okay, so this is this little loop here. So it's going around 3 times, and then it's going to default to Johannesburg if they don't type in something that's more than 3 characters in length. Okay, and then I'm going to send a response back again, and let's just do it in the code view this time. You said, and now just to show you these variables, I put this on user. So if I got a user, you see there's user.location. I didn't have to use that. I could just type this in, but essentially that's a variable. You can also get access to context variables from PVA as well. So PVA passes them in, and then you can use them in here as well. So that's pretty cool. So I know the location of the weather, but now I actually want to go and get the weather. So let's go and call an external service. So you'll see here, I can access an external resource, and I'm going to just send an HTTP request. Now, there's this API out there. There's lots of them. I just decided to use this one, which gets the weather. And so I'm going to use this public API just to go and get the weather. And it returns the weather in this kind of JSON format here. So let's just pop this in. And this is an HTTP GET. The URL is that. Now you'll see I'm using that variable again, user.location. So that's the, it's going to pass to the weather service, this user location, get it back, and then it's going to give me a whole bunch of data, right? But this is actually an authenticated service, so it does need a header. So I'm just going to add an HTTP header over here. I'm going to try and hide my key from you. Not sure how well I did, but anyway, so there's an HTTP header. And when the web service or this HTTP response comes back, where am I going to save it? So I'm going to save the response back, actually not into the user property, but into the dialog property. So, or the dialog object. A dialog represents what you actually see in front of you. So in PVA, it's called a topic. In Azure bot framework, it's called a dialog. A dialog is not a pop-up, it's a conversation. So topic is the same as dialog. And I'm going to make up a variable here called weather data. So it's coming into a variable called weather data. The content type is application. What was that example there? I'm sure someone will tell me as soon as I type something wrong. And it's the return data type is JSON. So now what I've got back is the data, and so I can carry on. And let's just go and send a response back. And actually, I could put an if statement in here, which I'm not going to do, but I could go and say, if the status code is 200, it actually worked, but if not, it didn't work, and then I could go down 2 different branches based on the result. But I'm just going to go linear for now, and I'm just going to type in here temp for, let's just put this in again, location is, and so now you'll see I've got dialog, weather data. But I actually know in there that content is what's returned. And then within there, and if I go back to my JSON, there's something called main and then temp, and that gives me the current temperature. So let's just put in main.temp. That should now return the temperature as a response back to the user. Are you with me so far? Questions? Let me pause.
Those variables that you create from like a dialog or user, is it free form that you can just type as and when you are creating them, or do you have to set them up in the background somewhere?
Yeah, you just type them. You don't have to pre-create them or anything like that.
So similar to the CI side, when you do the map match merge, you can just create your own object with its own properties.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it relates to that, but yeah, absolutely. You just literally type it. Whatever you want it, you type it.
Okay, cool.
And what you got to be careful of is it remembers them. So if the user asks for the weather again, so if it asks for them twice, they will be populated still. So location will still be populated. So typically at like the end of a process here, or end of the dialogue, you actually have to clear out those variables. So there's actions here to go and clear out, manage properties, to go and empty a property, set a property to nothing, or delete a property, so that it doesn't mess with you the next time you come around. All good?
So Michael Monet, I just have a question with regards to the different channels, right? So if voice is my channel of entry, am I correct in saying your response will also just be voice, or do you have to do that specifically to say, send a response and this is voice?
So, okay, so let me just clarify. What I'm doing right now is I'm adding a topic, a dialogue, actually as part of my PVA bot. Now, my PVA bot doesn't support voice today, so it's immaterial if I go and put speech as an option. Okay. But if I had to use Composer and create a native Azure bot, which is what Composer is also for, well, it was actually built first for that, but if I do it that way, it falls back to normal text response for voice channel. But if you want a different response other than what the text is, you can add speech, and so you can have a variation. So, and the example I gave there was, when it's text, you might say, hey, please type the name of your city. But if it's voice, you might say, hey, dude, where do you live? Or something like that. So, but yeah, it falls back to text through the voice channel. But you can optionally put in speech to override text, if that makes sense.
And just to add to that, can you have it so that they can type it up on the keypad during the call, like if you're asking for ID number?
I don't know, actually. I don't know. I've never played with the speech part. It's very, very new. It's actually in preview, and it only works on US telephone numbers right now, so I can't even get it to work. So I don't know. But ultimately, I do know we are going to support through this IVR. So when someone phones into a call center, what's actually going to answer is the bot. And then the bot's going to say, press 1 for support, press 2 for sales. And you're going to use this designer or PVA designer to design that experience. So I'm pretty sure it would support keypad at some point if it doesn't support it now.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. So any other questions, or should I carry on?
Sure.
Okay, cool. I'm going to carry on. So, so the output is going to be, it's not going to look that great. It's just some text. And one of the cool things that this supports is cards. So cards is a rich experience. And so, for example, let's just go and add a few in here. So I'm going to send a response. And now in my response, I actually want to send a card. And you saw earlier on, I could go to attachments, and I could add a new attachment, and I could do a hero card. And this looks a specific way, and you can put in a title, a subtitle, text, etc. So this is one way of doing it. Now, another way of doing it is to not type it in here. And actually behind the scenes, there's something called templates. Am I still online? Yes. Behind the scenes, there's something called a responses. A template is basically a little piece of that LG script, and you give it a name, and then you call that script by name, rather than having to actually type it into that other experience. And you'll see a few here. So here I've got this name called send activity, blah, blah, blah. And these are the responses within that little script. So these are what they call templates. If I just click show code here, you'll see them in a lot more detail. So you'll see here's one where I'm prompting, this is the actual name of it, and then it's giving these 3 options. And within here, you'll see that I've got this whole thing here called an adaptive card. So besides using those cards, there's some standard cards called hero, video card, audio card. You can custom create your own cards, your own UI. And let me just jump to something else. We've got this thing called the Adaptive Card Designer. Some of you might have seen this before, but this is where you can go and it's like a designer to build a card. And then this is, essentially what, if you use the designer, this is what it's creating. Essentially, you take this here and you can plug it into the bot. Are you losing me?
On and off.
It's breaking up a bit. Yeah, maybe just kill your video and see if it helps.
Yeah, and just follow-up question on that with those cards. Can you align those cards to the JSON from a web request?
Yeah, so let's actually give that a go. How's that? So you can see I've got some other cards I've pre-created as templates. There's an audio card, a video card. So there's a whole bunch of them. Now there's one here already, and I've already pre-created it. So this is a weather card that's going to show the weather. And what you'll see in here, let's go here. The text that's going to put here is user.location. And then it's going to put the main temperature here. See, these are variables. Well, this is that dialog weather data. Yeah, so then I'm going to do the max weather and the min weather. So I just have to call these things, right? So let's just go back to my bot. And let's just go here. So when I send a response, literally I can go here and I can just go and type in here that I want to send the weather adaptive card. So that's the name of the that template, and I can keep going on, and I'll just add a few others. Send another response. Video card. I'm just going to do this so you see what they kind of look like. Show code. Here we go. So I've quite a but now one of the challenges with building a topic or a dialogue in this way for PVA is you can't test it. There's no testing way to do this when you use it with PVA. What you have to do is you have to go now and publish it. And I'm going to just click publish. And it's essentially taking what I've done now and kind of saving it back to PVA. So let's wait for this to happen. And sometimes this, for some reason, kind of stalls, and then I have to kind of close it, reopen it, and do it again. And sometimes you get errors as well, and then you follow the error and you see what you've done wrong. And I've got a feeling I may get an error, but we'll see in a second.
If you are building a normal bot, so not integrated into PVA, you will be able to test in this interface. So
what's that?
If you are building the just a normal bot using the composer, you would be able to test in the composer interface. Sorry. So
yes, yes. If it's not for PVA, yeah, but not PVA, you get a little. You'll see this chat widget on the top right-hand side is a grayed out.
Yeah.
Okay, so that didn't publish successfully. I know why, but I'm not going to explain the detail behind it. But you know, in all good demos, I had actually previously created it. So what happens is when you save it, it comes back in here, and if you hover on this little icon here, it'll actually say that this is a composer trigger. And if I go and look at the design of this now, you'll see what it does is it's got your trigger phrases. Now, mine says, please tell me the foo bar. I was just messing around because I didn't want weather to conflict with my new weather bot, but we'll test this one anyway. And then you'll see it's just got this big block here that's now actually the one that we built in Composer. So if I go and say Pooh, which is the trigger for weather, it says, welcome to the service, which city? So I'll say JH. And I didn't build it exactly the same. It says change, which is basically, I've only put in 2 characters. And I've got a whole bunch of error messages which aren't quite true, but anyway. So let's type Johannesburg now, which is more than 3 characters, more than 2 characters. Oh, my demo just blew up really badly. Oh no, I knew that would happen. Let me just try and fix this quickly. I want to see what this actual error is. Invalid language generation template. Sorry, let's just go back here. I did see something that it didn't like in here earlier. Sorry, give me 2 seconds. You see, this is the root dialog. And this is what sometimes happens. You get these messages, you just don't quite know where the issue is. What responses? I think it's something in here. I saw something in here earlier on that it didn't like. I don't see it giving any errors. How frustrating. How frustrating. Look, I'm going to run out of time trying to debug this in front of you. But just trust me when I say the cards then look amazing. Like you get these very nice cards. It usually works. I get the temperature coming through and life is good. Yeah, a little frustrating. But there we go. There we go. Okay, before I jump onto the next part, questions around Composer and what you saw there.
So Michael, just maybe something on adaptive cards that I've done in the past and it works pretty well, is that you can in actual fact use Azure Maps and you generate like an image, a dynamic image, and you bring that back to a on the adaptive card in the Power in the chat, basically, right? So if somebody asks for a location or something like that, or even an area that's been plotted, you generate that image and then you respond back into the chat with that specific image, and it works pretty well.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that. Obviously, an image is also supported in normal PVA, but if you want adaptive cards, they're not supported in PVA by default. You have to do a Composer solution like I did now. To get adaptive cards to work. Adaptive cards are coming to PVA in the future, but they're not there now. And adaptive cards also are interactive. Like literally it plays a little video. You can see which button they pressed and take action based on that. So adaptive cards are quite a lot richer than just sending back an image. But yeah, absolutely. You can send back images even just in normal PVA. You can do that. But if you want an adaptive card, then you need to use Composer or a custom skill, which we'll get onto now. And then hopefully when you're doing your tip and trick, Morne, I'll just get that working and so I can show everyone how it works. Okay, so you saw some of the good stuff there in theory. These are kind of like unique. You can't do this in PVA, like regular expression support to validate input, response variations, hello, hi, how's it? It kind of varies through them. The whole LG templates are pretty cool. There's a lot you can do with them. Logic, if else statements, variables, functions, trim, upper, left, current, date, all these types of things. Adaptive cards or card responses in general, hero, video, etc. Just something else to note that when I save it and publish it back to PVA, it still runs in the PVA instance, and it's part of your PVA solution. So if you export your PVA as a solution, it's still in there. So you don't have to go and actually provision anything in Azure to use this integration. You just go into the PVA, you say open in Composer, and off you go. So that's pretty cool. Some things that are quite tricky is it's tricky to debug, as you've just seen now. It replaces the entire PVA topic. So you saw when I debugged it in PVA, you just have this one block, and at that point, it's running the whole Composer bot essentially that you created. And you can't edit it in PVA. You have to edit it in Composer, and then you're always in Composer for that going forward. Okay, so the next topic is a custom skill. So what's a custom skill? A custom skill is essentially like you want to encapsulate a piece of logic and make it available to PVA. Hello. Is that me?
That could be a
I don't
bot.
see anyone else muted. Yeah, it looks like it's clear. Oh, there we go.
Okay. Interesting. So a skill is kind of, it's an encapsulation piece of logic that you today have to build as using code, the Azure Bot SDK. So you code up this skill, and it can either be a single step or a multi-turn full-on conversation as a reusable asset that then you make available to PVA, and then PVA can go and call it. And it can be something simple like, updating a data source, or reading something from a data source, or it could be much more complicated. It's a full-on, 17-step conversation that it supports. But essentially, it's kind of like a black box to the person that uses it from PVA. They just sign up and say, I want to use the skill. So typically, a developer would go and build the skill and then make it available to PVA. You can pass in parameters to it. It can pass parameters back, and it's all pretty good. Skills weren't developed just for PVA. They were actually developed for Azure bots. And so from I'm building an Azure bot, I can call a skill. Even in Composer, you can call a skill. But from PVA now, you can also call skills. And so if you look at kind of like the architecture, on the left-hand side, you've got the user who's using the web chat or the Teams chat or whatever the chat channel is. Then in the middle, you've got your kind of like your main bot. So this bot is something that's built in, maybe Azure or PVA. And then that calls into a skill that knows how to fulfill a specific function. And so this is the thing on the far right-hand side that you go and build in code. And basically, this is the approach that you use to build one of these things. As I said, you code it up, and typically you're going to go and get a sample from GitHub, and you're going to customize that sample. You're going to build it on your local machine, so you're going to debug it on your local machine, and you're going to test it out. And once you're happy with it, you're going to publish it, and it's going to publish into Azure as a web app, as an app. And then you're going to connect PVA to that app. And in order to connect PVA to that app, the secret source is something called this manifest file. And that manifest file describes your skill. What's the URL of the skill? What are the input parameters? What are the output parameters? And then once it's hooked up, you can then go and use it from PVA. So it's kind of just give you a quick overview of that. So let's pop this up here. Now, my intention is not to show you a lot of code. Okay, that's not the idea. But this is just a sample from GitHub. And what you'll see in the sample is it actually ships with two parts to it. You've got your root bot, which is the bot that's going to call the skill. And so then we've got the skill bot, which is, it actually just echoes what the person types. And there's this function here called onMessageActivityAsync. This gets called when someone sends a message, essentially, to the bot or to the skill. And this is now you go and code it. So literally, what this thing is doing is it's saying, as long as the person didn't type end or stop, do this over here. And what it's going to do, it's going to take what the person typed in. This is how you get what the person typed in. It's called a turn context. Take what they've typed in and just send it back again. But it's going to prefix it with echo. So it's just going to echo whatever the person typed in. And then this is the thing here, this line here, that's actually going to send it back to the user. And you could go and build cards, activity cards, just like we did in Composer, but this is kind of like the coding way. And literally, I can go and run this thing. Let me just run it. Let's see if this is going to work. So let's take this echo skill. I'm going to run this is on my machine. And so then once that's running, you've got the bot framework emulator that you can use to test it. So you can go and open it. And it's running as local host on my machine on this little port here. So let's just connect to that. I can run the test. Oh, sorry, there's just one change I need to make to this thing. Let's just try that again. Let's open the bot again, and if I type test. So this is a .NET, sorry, this is the bot framework emulator. It's a way you can connect to bots that you build in Azure using the bot framework. And so as I hit test, I actually have some breakpoints in my code, and you'll see if I look at the text here, it's actually test. That's what I typed in. I'm just going to hit run. And so it should have replied. There we go, echo test. And so I can go and code up the skill using code, right? So that's the concept. Then the other thing I've got here is a manifest file which describes, so this is the manifest file, this describes the skill. It describes the endpoint that it's at. It describes if it receives any parameters and if it's got any output parameters. So this is, I'm not going to go into the detail of how you build this, but I'm happy to share that with you. It's all public. And so now, what I should do once I'm finished building it here is I actually go and publish this. So what you do here is you go and publish this thing, which I've already done. You click publish, and then you publish it to Azure. And now it runs in Azure, and then you go and configure PVA to connect to this thing. Now, I'm doing a bit of magic jiggery-pokery here. You wouldn't generally do what I'm about to do here. But just to kind of show you that it works, what I've done is I've published it to Azure, but I'm actually not going to connect my PVA to the bot running in Azure. I'm actually going to connect PVA to the bot running on my machine. And the way that I'm doing that is I'm using this little utility called ngrok. You can go and download ngrok. What it does is it takes my local host web server and publishes it on the internet using this URL here. So I've got it already running. Let's just pop it up here. So you run this tool, and then it goes and reverse publishes my local host to the internet. And so I'm actually going to connect PVA to this URL here, which is, a very interesting thing to do. You in theory wouldn't do this because it causes some issues, but let's just give it a go anyway. So let's go and create a, sorry, let me just delete. I've got another topic in PVA that's consuming it, so I'm just going to go and delete that. So if I go into PVA and I go to skills, you'll see this option to add a skill. So if I click add a skill, I can then go and put in the URL to where my bot is or where my manifest file is. And so what it's going to go and do is it's going to go and read that manifest file, understand what my skill looks like, and that's fine. The skill's already been added, and that's true. So here it is here. So I had previously added it. And when I added it, it understood that there's one activity in it called echo activity, which can accept a parameter. So it's got an input parameter and an output parameter. So there it is there. So now what I can go and do is I can go and build a new topic. So let's just go and create a new topic. And let's give this thing a name. I'll actually redo, let's just call this jump, because I don't think I've got anything that triggers off a phrase of jump. So let's say jump, jumping, I want to jump. Let's go to my authoring canvas. And so you would go and build, your PVA topic like you usually would. Howdy. But now what you'll see is you've got this option to go to, to call an action. And when you call an action, you would have seen in the past you can call flow, flow from Power Automate. So I've got a few there. But you'll see here is that one that I've just added essentially. So this is a skill that I've coded, and this skill in theory is running in Azure, but actually in my little demo here, I've got it running off my local machine. You'll see I've got a whole bunch of other ones that one of my colleagues built and gave me for demo purposes. But let's just use this one, and it accepted one parameter and it output a parameter. So it accepts a parameter. So I'm just going to put in a parameter here of demo input param, but you could, that could be a variable that you got from previous, and then you're sending it to the skill, which is then going to do something. And then there's an output variable. So life is good. But remember, it's going to echo whatever someone types in. So let's just save this. So now you can see the difference. With Composer, I built an entire topic, an entire dialogue. With a skill, it's just one little action inside of my bot that can then do a whole bunch of things. I mean, this thing could have 30 conversations itself, turns. So let's just test this out now. And my trigger phrase is jump. And you see it started. And I'm quite upset because every demo I'm doing right now is not working. But let me just try one thing, which is just security stuff, which allows this to work. Let's just rerun this.
There were no offerings made before the session to the demo guys, I see.
Yeah, I've had a nightmare. I
was about to say the same thing. Try recording it when it does work, so you can at least go back to the video.
Yes. But there we go. Okay, I knew it was a permissions issue. Okay, so there we go. So I called it from PVA, and the skill is actually running on my PC. And you can see I've actually come into the breakpoint now. So I can actually go and debug this code that's coming from the cloud, which is pretty amazing, right? And the text that was typed in was jump. So there it is. And there was a parameter that was sent in. I mean, I'm not going to go and debug this whole thing, but let's just do this. You get all these variables, and one of them is value. Where is that value? Oh, null. Why is it null? Anyway. Okay, still null. Anyway, we'll ignore that. My demo's gone okay so far. And then now it's going to go and then send back out echo plus this. And so it should now say echo jump. So I should get back echo jump. So I'm having a conversation within the skill that's been developed in code. You don't have to know too much about the code, but that's the concept behind skills. And so there I'm going to end. I'll ask if there's any questions, but that's the two models essentially. One is you can go and instead of building topics in here, you can build them in the composer. The other integration is you can go and create skills. You go and build them in code and then call the skills from here. And there's a whole bunch of sample skills on GitHub. You can go and get some very simple ones. Mine's the simplest one that just echoes back what you've typed in. But you can imagine in code, you might update a database. You might do a whole bunch of things. There is the other question of should you be doing this stuff? And the answer is always try and do it in normal PVA first with flow. So you need to connect to databases, write data, read data. Rather do it as a PVA bot with flow. But if it gets much more complicated and you need to, for example, today you need to do it in adaptive card, then you're going to have to do it either through Composer or a custom skill. But adaptive cards, as I said, are coming to PVA as a native feature, but just not there yet, but pretty soon. So I'm going to stop there, pause for any questions, and then hand over to Morné.
This is awesome, Michael. Thank you very much, man. Definitely learned a lot today.
Yeah. Any questions for Mike?
No, this is really great.
Awesome. Thanks, Morné. Over to you.
Thank you. Let me just quickly do this. Share my screen. There we go. So today I just want to talk around SVGs inside of Power Apps. And I think the first thing that I want to talk to guys about is what essentially is SVGs, right? So if we use the term SVG, it's essentially a vector graphics. And how that differs from a normal graphic like a JPEG or PNG, it is graphics that's made out of a bunch of points, as well as it's made out of like an XML markup language, right? Some of the examples of SVGs are things like fonts, things like icons. And the reason why this is very important is that it's very scalable. So if you think of an SVG and if you think of an image, as you guys can see on the screen here, if I take a specific image and I actually drag that image and I make it bigger, a lot of the time, or rather scale that image, a lot of the time what will happen is you'll get pixelation. And with SVG, because it is a vector graphics, you can actually make it as big or as small as you like. So how do we actually utilize that in Power Apps? And some of the tips I'm going to show you today is that with using an SVG, replacing normal images with SVGs, you can get quite a nice layout look and feels, as well as incorporating that into your Power Apps quite easily, right? So once again, the SVGs are a markup language. It's essentially based on XML, but also in HTML5 is a bunch of things that you can do within SVGs, including things like animations, etc. So let me just quickly hop out of the slides. Come now. So the first thing that I want to show you guys is maybe just some resources that I utilize for my SVG images, because one thing is that to use SVGs is quite easy. Another thing is, where do I get all of these icons and layouts and images, right? So the first place is in actual fact on the Microsoft Docs site. So on the Microsoft Docs site itself, we've got a bunch of images that's been just released within June that you can just accept and download. It will actually give you the whole application set of the Microsoft product set of Dynamics 365, the Dataverse, and then all the related products. For inspiration, if you want to go and look at layouts, there's a site called Dribble, and Dribble is quite nice because it shows a bunch of different layouts for things like mobile as well as screens. And then for generating SVGs, I found some great sites. So some of the sites that I've used before is called Get Waves. So it's essentially an SVG wave generator. So if I go and I make these SVGs, what I can do is it gives me this patterns, and then all that I can do is I select that. You'll see that here it gives me the SVG, and once again, like I mentioned earlier, it looks like XML. It is essentially XML, but it's all my points that's available for me, and I can just copy that code. A secondary site is a SVG background generator, and you can generate a bunch of these different backgrounds, and let's say I select that one. It also shows me all the SVGs that I can utilize. And lastly, I think one of my favorite is this chaos machine. So it looks a little bit messy, but you can generate some cool layouts, and I'll show you guys how to use that now within Power Apps. So just say generate new. It does this weird layouts for you, and you can use this within the apps to make very nice look and feels, right? So how do we actually utilize this within Power Apps? Oh, lastly, before I go, there's one called Pens Place, and it's available on GitHub. And there's a lot of icons within here, SVG icons that you can utilize, that you just select and you can search for it. It's been updated regularly, so there's thousands and thousands and thousands of icons within that. So if we look at the Power App itself, there's a very plain basic Power App that I've built. Is that in the chaos machine, I've just got this background template. In the image, all that you can do is you set the source to data image SVG, and then I encode the SVG layout, right? Because the SVG is essentially just XML markup that's happening in here, right? So you can do that, and you get quite a nice layout. Just maybe make this small again. You get quite a nice layout of it. So if I just play this, I'll show you guys, this is a screen, a welcome screen. Here's another pattern that I got from Chaos Machine. This is another one I got that I thought looked pretty nice. And this is an icon that I got from this icon builder. And I'll show you guys how quick and easy it is to actually do that, right? So when I go into my Canvas apps itself, that's how I select the last screen. And I just go into media, insert image, and now I've just got a blank image. Let's say I use this icon builder. I just want to utilize this image. What I can do here, I select that image, I copy that layout for me, and I just change that image source into what was just selected, right? Let me just maybe take that out. Change that sample image to that. And there I've got that icon. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can scale this to your heart's desire, because this is just as a vector image. You can make it as big or as small as you want to, and it will keep its, it will keep its clarity. It won't pixelate or change or anything like that. So that was, I think, the quickest and easiest subtext that I can share with you guys for today. One last thing, maybe just to mention, is that when you do use things like this chaos machine, right, and you want to utilize the SVG, you'll see you can select the SVG and it will download that file for you. And when you open that file, it will show it. But if you just go view source, now I've got all that information in here. So the one thing that you have to do is essentially go and just replace all the double quotes or single quotes for Power Apps. So I copy out all of that information. Let me just go into my notepad here somewhere. I had notepad open, but you just replace all the double quotes with single quotes, and you can paste it within your source in here. Oh, and something else I forgot to mention lastly is one of the other tools that you can utilize is in actual fact PowerPoint. So if you go in here and you say add I think it's a shape or an icon or even a picture, let's say just from stock images. Just waiting for this to load. But it will give you the option to select, I believe you can select, no, not this one. You can select images from online, right? So it will be icons and those type of things. And essentially what you can do is that you can, I'm just going to select an icon, sorry. What you can do is you can just right click and you change that to be an SVG, right? So very quick and simple. Let's say I select that one, insert it. It will download it for me, move it over there. And you see here, I can go and actually go and say, save as picture. And inside here, it saves it as SVG, right? So quick and easy way of doing it, quick and easy way of getting the layout that you want, and another quick and easy way to get icons out of the system using SVGs, right? I would recommend everybody start using SVGs. If you also look at the way things are progressing on the web, people are moving away from traditional icons and especially things like logos of product sets. You'll see on all the Microsoft sites, including our Azure site, they're utilizing SVGs rather than JPEGs, right? Because you can kind of scale it and it's also smaller, right? The files is basically just XML, so it's very small. So that's what's the tip from me, the tip for the week for me. And I'm going to hand it back to Jonathan.
Awesome. Thanks, Monet. Any questions for Monet? Okay, perfect. Thanks for sharing, Monet. Really appreciate it. Michael apparently got your demo working.
I did. I do. Can you see it again?
I believe you. Yeah, awesome.
Let's try this again. So I'm using the one I created earlier. I actually deleted the previous one. But so where's my location? Johannesburg. We're going to loop this time around. Getting the weather for Johannesburg. So then it first just wrote it out as text. And then I'm using, that was a custom adaptive card. And you can see there's the temperature coming through there. There's the high and there's the low. This is actually today's date. So all of this is parameterized now. And then this is just an example of the video card. And so, I mean, this is what I like a lot, is being able to create like quite a rich experience. This is another one I didn't show you. This is one of the ones that one of my colleagues built. And it just gives you like a catalog of different things that maybe you can do. And then as you click one of these, it actually does something. So yeah, so these are the type of experiences you can create with adaptive cards. Hey, at last it's working. But what you will notice is on the right-hand side, when it actually called that dialogue created through Composer, you don't get to actually step through each step that's actually in here, unfortunately. So I can't step through these. Obviously, you could build this standalone and then kind of reproduce it and then publish it to PVA. So build this standalone just purely in Azure, not using PVA. And then you can debug it. You can step through it. But as soon as you publish it to PVA like this, you don't get to step through it. So there we go, working.
Nice. Thanks, Mike.
Woohoo.
Okay, perfect. So thanks, Mike. Appreciate you sharing. I just want to open up the floor to any questions, discussions, anything that you guys want to know or hear about. Okay, perfect. So just one last thing. if you have a look at the meetup.com site, you'll see there is a link in the chat at the bottom to a survey form. So if you are interested in attending any of the in-a-day sessions, just complete that survey and then we'll get back to you in the next couple of weeks. I did post it a couple of weeks ago, but I don't think it notifies anyone when it is up there. So just go complete that. Let us know which one you would be interested. We are offering the app in a day, RPA in a day, the Power Virtual Agents in a day as well. So just go in, register, just let us know which ones you're interested in, and we can look at setting that up. David, Michael, anything else from your side, Monet?
All good. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
So I actually just want to say that, you know, some of the use cases I ran into, especially with bots, is things like approvals and people taking leave. You know, so there is quite a lot of different use cases, especially also working between PVA bot and Azure bots, right? When you start doing things like integrating into WhatsApp services or Trello or one of those things, you know, what Michael showed you really, really helps. Thank you, everybody. Yeah.
Thanks all. I hope you have a great day further. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, everyone.
All next month.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks.
That's all.
Cheers all.